الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب زدني علما آمين. So we were doing Kitab al-Tawheed by Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab. Today we're going to do chapter number 20, the condemnation of one who worship Allah at grave of righteous man. And how then does this amount to worship of the man? So in the Sahih al-Bukhari and Muslim, Aisha radiallahu anha reported Salama mentioned to Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam that in Abyssinia she saw a church full of pictures and statues, and he sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when a righteous man or pious worshipper among them dies, they build a place of worship over his grave and set up all kinds of pictures and statues. They are the worst of all creatures before Allah. They combine the two evils, worshipping at the graves and making graven images and statues. Also in Bukhari and Muslim it is reported that Aisha radiallahu anha narrated, when the death approached Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he began to draw a piece of cloth, like bed sheet, over his face, sometimes covering and sometimes removing because of distress. So he sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in the state, Allah's curse be upon Jews and Christians for taking the graves of their prophets as places of worship. Thus he sallallahu alaihi wasallam warned the people about their action. Had there not been any fear of making the prophet's grave a place of worship, his sallallahu alaihi wasallam grave would have been as open as graves of his companion radiallahu anhu. So again, here what we learn from both the hadith, like first hadith about full of pictures, church was full of pictures and statues, and when a righteous man or a pious worshipper among them dies, they build a place of worship over his grave and set up all kinds of pictures and statues. So they are the worst of the creatures before Allah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, Ulaika shirarul khalqil indallah fahulai jam'u baina. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they combine the two evils, like worshipping at the graves and making graven images and statues. So from that hadith we learn that not to make the graves as the worshipping place, and also not to make images and statues and worship them. In another hadith what we learn, when death was approaching sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he covered his face with the bed sheet because of the distress, and he cursed Jews and Christians for taking the graves of their prophets as a place of worship, and the people about their actions and fear of making the prophet's grave as a place of worship. So he don't want his grave to be a place of worship. And next hadith, this is in Muslim, reported from Jundum bin Abdullah radiallahu anhu, who narrated, I heard Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, only 5 days before his death, I am free and clear towards Allah of having any of you as my Khalil, especially close friend. Verily, Allah has taken me as his Khalil, just as he had taken Ibrahim alayhi salam as a Khalil. If I would have taken anyone from my ummah as Khalil, I would have taken Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu as a Khalil. Beware, those who proceed before you used to make their prophets' graves into place of worship. Beware, don't take any graves as place of worship. I forbid you to do so. So in this hadith what we learn, who is the Khalil of Allah? First here mention about close friend to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ibrahim alayhi salam. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if I have to take from my ummah, I would take Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And also he said, Prophet's grave into place of worship. Beware, don't take any graves as a place of worship. And he said, I forbid you to do so. He said not to do so. He Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam forbade this at the end of his life. After this forbidding of taking graves as a masjid place of worship, he cursed anyone who did any such deed within this context. Prayer at the graves is one of these deeds, even if no masjid has been built. This is the meaning of his Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam words. His fear his grave would be taken as masjid. The companions never built any place of worship around his grave, any place which is intended for prayer or where prayer is performed has indeed have been taken as masjid. Just as Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Ja'ilat li ardu masjidan wa tahura. The whole earth has been made for me as masjid, and it is pure and clean. Masjidan wa tahura. Ahmad has reported with good sanad that Ibn Masud radiallahu anhu narrated in a marfu hadith tradition traced to Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The most evil men are those upon whom the signs of hour of resurrections comes while they are still alive, and those who take graves as place of worship masjid. This tradition was also reported by Abu Hatim and in his Sahih. So here important issues of the chapter. The intimidation of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam over the one who builds a mosque to worship Allah near the grave of righteous person, even with the good intention. So don't take graves as the place of worship. And prohibition of statues and likeness and the gravity of the matter. Lesson in the emphasis of Prophet ﷺ on this. He first explained and clarified the issue politely. Then 5 days before his death, saying what he said, then how he found at the time of his death what was previously said insufficient in the context. Prophet ﷺ strongly prohibited the turning of his grave into masjid before it had come into existence. It was the practice of Jews and Christians to turn the graves of the prophets into place of worship. His curse on the Jews and Christians for this practice, and his intention in doing so was a warning to us regarding his grave. The reason for not raising his grave, the meaning of taking them grave as a masjid, and Prophet ﷺ linked those who took the graves as a masjid to those upon whom Allah the hour will occur. He mentioned the means to shirk before its actual occurrence along with its final consequences. The mentioning of Prophet ﷺ in his speech, a refutation of two worst sects of innovated just 5 days prior to his death. Some scholars have not included these sects in 72 sect. These two sects are Rafida and Jahamiya. The occurrence of shirk and graves worshipping was due to Rafida sect. They were the first to build masjid over the graves. And the suffering of Prophet ﷺ with pains and affliction from the agony of death. Allah awarded the favor of making him Khalil, friend. So he is also a close friend to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just as Ibrahim alayhi salam. A clear declaration that close friendship is more valuable than love. A clear declaration that As-Siddiq Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was the best of the companions. The indication to him Abu Bakr as a Khalif, successor to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let's start chapter number 21. If any questions you can ask in the end or you can message me later. Exaggeration in the graves of the righteous person tends them to become idol worshippers besides Allah. What is the chapter's name? Chapter number 21, Exaggeration in the graves of righteous person. Taking the righteous person as the place of worship. That's what it means. And to become idol worshipper besides Allah. The person says, I believe in Allah, and they are doing idol worship too. Imam Malik rahmatullah alayh recorded in his book Muwatta that Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "O Allah, never turn my grave into idol to be worshipped." Allah's wrath intensified on a people who turn their Prophet's grave into masjid. Concerning the verse, have you been considered Allat and Uzza? This is in Surah number 53, ayah number 19. Ibn Jarir at-Tabari reported from Sufyan, from Mansur, from Mujahid. He, Lat, used to serve the pilgrims by preparing sawiq, fine flour of barley or meat, meat and wheat mixed with water and butter for them. After his death, these people began to stay and confine at his grave for the purpose of reward. The same was reported by Abul Jawzi rahmatullah alayh from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma reported, Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam cursed the women who visit the graves. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam also cursed those who set up mosque and lights over graves. You understand, mosque and lighting over the graves. You can understand this. You can see this in Asian countries more. The hadith has been confirmed by Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, and Ibn Majah and Nasai. So here what we learn in this chapter: explanation of the idols, explanation of worship. Prophet ﷺ did not seek refuge in Allah except from that which he feared would occur. Prophet ﷺ joining this supplication, O Allah, never turn my grave with taking the graves of Prophet as masjid. Mention of the intense wrath of Allah on those who indulge in such activities. Of most important is the discrimination as to how the worship of Lat, one of the major pre-Islamic idols, was started. The knowledge that Lat was the grave of a righteous man. Lat was the name of a person buried in the grave, and mention of the meaning behind the idol being named such. Curse of Prophet ﷺ on the women who visit the graves. Not to visit the graves, the curse on them. Prophet ﷺ curse upon those who put up lights on the graves. That's what we learn in the chapter number 21. So let's start chapter number 22. The protectiveness of Al-Mustafa ﷺ of Tawheed and his blockading every path leading to Shirk. All the Shirk path, completely abandoning them. Allah the Most Exalted said, Verily there has come unto you a Muhammad ﷺ messenger from among yourself, whom you know well. It grieves him that you should receive any injury or difficulty. O Muhammad ﷺ is anxious over you to be rightly guided, to repent to Allah and beg him to pardon and forgive your sins, in order that you may enter for the believers. You may enter paradise and be safe from the punishment of hellfire for the believers. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam is full of pity, kind and merciful. But if they turn away, say Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah is sufficient for me. La ilaha illa huwa, none has the right to worship but He, and Him I put my trust, and He is the Lord of the mighty throne. This is in Surah number 9, ayah number 128 and 129. Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu narrated that Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Do not make your homes grave. Do not make my grave as a place of celebration. Send you salat, blessing, graces, honor and mercy on me. Your salat will be conveyed to me wherever you may be. So when we do, durood, from wherever we are, it will be reached to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is mentioned by Abu Dawud, and this is a hadith which is reliable chain narrator. Ali bin Hussein radiallahu anhu narrated, he saw a man at a space that was at the grave of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. and he would go in it and supplicate. So he, Ali bin Hussein, prevented the man and instructed him, saying, who in turn heard it from my grandfather. So he said, should I not tell you a hadith which I heard from my father, who in turn heard it from my grandfather, Ali radiallahu anhu, who repeated from Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, do not take my graves as a place of celebration, nor your homes as graves. Make salat, blessing, grace, honors, and mercy upon me. For your salutation, asking safety for me, will be conveyed to me from wherever you are. And this is the thing we learn here. First, he saw a man at the grave of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he prevented that man and he instructed and said, do not take a grave as a place of celebration, nor your home upon for your salutation. Like people collectively, they get together and they start reciting Durud. That's what he means. There is no such thing like, collectively reciting Durud. You can recite Durud wherever you are, it will reach to Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So, what are the important issues of this chapter? Explanation of Suratul Bara, that is Suratul Tawbah, ayah number 128 and 129. And also Prophet ﷺ did his best to keep his ummah far away from the boundaries of shirk as far as possible. Prophet's concern for our well-being and success and his compassion and mercy. Prophet ﷺ forbade visiting his grave in certain manner through visiting the grave is among the best of deeds. Prophet ﷺ forbade us making excessive visit to his grave. He urging to perform voluntary prayer in the home. It is established among the companions radiallahu anhum that offering salat in cemetery is prohibited. The explanation that a person invocation of salat, blessing, graces, honor and mercy and salam upon Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is conveyed to him even if he may be very far away. So there is no need of what some through as a necessary to be close, or you have to go there. Many times it happens you won't be able to go to Makkah or Medina, but still you recite dua, it will reach to Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is in Al-Barzakh, where the salat and salam of his ummah are conveyed to him. So that's what Allah said. We don't know how it will reach him, but whatever Allah said, we believe in that. So till here we did chapter number 22. We finished chapter number 22. So Jazakallah khairan kaseera. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka